What's going on, everybody? We are back, episode number 209 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight we're talking UFC Seattle. One of it actually, the vibes I'm getting from this card, lags, are a COVID card. You know, with the amount of
Yeah.
cancellations we've had, it has that vibe. It's become a shitty low-level card after having it was a pretty decent card originally for what was booked, but it's turned into a mess. So, but we'll break it down and we'll bet on it. So, as usual, guys, if you like the show and like the channel, drop a like, subscribe, help us out. We'd appreciate it. And we're brought to you guys by fightnumbers.com for 35% or 30% off your first month's subscription there. Use the promo code CLUB, CLUB. They got the live odds screen, which gives you live odds for most domestic and foreign books in real time, which is sick. They have John Kelly's Trends tool. They got John Kelly's DFS predictions, which are also awesome. And they got bets from Pepe and Ozzy. So it's well worth the price of admission. Use a promo code CLUB, CLUB. So let's talk about, real quick, before we get into this shit show, we can talk about how we did last night. I went up 2.79 units. Bit triggering because I had Ishmael Bonfim. I had 2.96 units on it at minus 148, which was an insanely good number. And I mean, the fight was basically going the way I expected it was going to go until, the question mark kick. And then the stoppage, I don't know if he couldn't hear the doctor or what was going on with that. It was very, very bizarre, the whole thing. So that was a bummer. I had a big bet on Walter Walker. Basically, it was a max bet for me. I had him to win 3 units at like an average of like minus 174. I think it's pretty bearish that this guy's jumping heel hooks early in round 1, but Dontel Mays did not offer much, predictably, taken down easily, submitted pretty easily. I won a unit and a half on Cater and Zalal, goes distance at minus 186, which was cool. I won a unit and a half also on Estevam and Aguilar, over 2.5 at minus 116. And then I lost 0.25 units on Julia Avila by decision at plus 1,000. So good night for me, up 2.79 units. But again, very triggering because I feel like it could have been a lot bigger without that fucking question mark kick. How did you do, Legs?
Yeah, no, that was an interesting fight. And we were just talking about it before we hopped on here. I didn't get a chance to watch that fight and watched it, this morning. And it was quite interesting. It sounded like, couldn't see. And then like, oh, okay. Waved it off because it sounded like he couldn't see. So I'm like, okay, well.
Which makes, if he couldn't see, but like, I don't know if he couldn't see or if it was just, a mistranslation, because the cut was like here. It wasn't like anywhere that should have been bad, that should have been, that should have been fine. So yeah, that was a bummer, but it was a good night. And now we jump into this card.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I was just talking about that real quick. But I only had one play of the night. I had Delgado parlayed at minus 280 with Walker at minus 225 for minus 104 for a unit and a half. Pretty sweat-free on both of those. But I was going to talk about the Walker heel hook when you were talking about it a little bit. Did you hear his interview where he has 3 different heel hook techniques, and he's only shown one of them? So he's only shown one of them so far. He's only shown one of them so far in the UFC, but the people that he trains with, they know the other 2.
So he's God, that's I mean, see, but that makes me I like his process for heavyweight, but that makes me want to fade him. You jump heel hook at heavyweight against the wrong guy, and you're gonna get your face smashed through the canvas, So
luckily it's Dontel Mays though, so definitely not the wrong guy.
Dontel Mays is harmless. So
yes.
I actually honestly was pretty sure he was gonna get it as soon as he went for it. I was like, if Cyril Gane heel hook Dontel Mays, I mean, he's probably fine.
So last thing I want to talk about, last card though, because I saw it on Twitter a little bit. Our boy Magic talked about it in the main event. So Paul Felder instantly reacts when Hobocop gets finished, like he had a ton of money on him. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
It was weird because he said he didn't. And so I watched it back, and you see his anger when he throws a pen down, but he's also talking about Jared needs to go for it now. He needs to step on the gas. He's giving him, it doesn't sound like he's nervous at all. He's giving Jared plenty of plaudits, but the reaction did look stunningly similar to how I react when I lose a lot of money on a fight. We're getting NY Goblin asking if we can start with the main event. Should we start from the top down? I mean, you want to? I don't really care. It's up to you.
It's up to you. We can do it. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. All right. We'll start from the top then. That'll be interesting. Little switch it up
Yeah,
here.
why not?
Yeah. All right. Last fight of the night, main event. We got Henry Cejudo taking on Song Yadong. The current price, Song minus 260. The comeback on Cejudo plus 220. What are your thoughts here, lads? You think Henry's got a shot as an underdog?
I think we're probably going to butt heads here, but I think like the price is fine on Song. I think Henry has to have a large bits of wrestling success here to be competitive in this fight. I think even if he does land a couple takedowns, he's likely not having like much meaningful control on the ground and on the feet. Song, in my opinion, obviously much bigger hitter, and I think he's a better striker on the feet. So I like Song.
I am considering betting Henry. My concern with the Henry side of things is just obviously his age. He's 38 years
38.
old. He retired a couple years ago. So, it's a big concern, obviously.
Mm.
Having said that, though, Henry's last two fights were a split decision with Aljamain Sterling, who was the incumbent champion at the time, one of the best bantamweights ever, and losing a decision to the current champion and maybe the best bantamweight ever, Merab Dvalishvili, a fight in which he won the first round, and he clearly showed up injured to that fight. And, in terms of this fight, maybe Song just pumps him on age, but something I got to say, Henry is a really, really good and effective neutralizer. He doesn't engage hard much, and I feel like Song can get lulled into low-volume fights. You go rewatch the Chris Gutierrez fight. He won it firmly, but he only landed 77 significant strikes over 5 rounds. It's not like Song is going to come out here, pull a Max Holloway and land 200 significant strikes, unless you're going to engage him in that kind of a fight. But that's not really what Henry does. So with that dynamic, I kind of think the margins are going to probably be relatively thin. And then you talk about Henry's grappling. I don't expect Henry to come out here and grapple fuck Song per se, but I think he'll get a couple takedowns. And Song has not looked great the couple times he's been put flat on his back in the UFC. If you get him down near the fence, he works up okay. If you get him flat, though, we saw Corey Sandhagen hold him down for half a round. We saw Peter Yan get a fair amount of top time against him. You go further back in the day, we saw Cody Stamann just maul him on top. I feel like in a fight that could be very, very low volume, a takedown or 2 or 3 could swing the kind of rounds toward Henry. I don't know. I really just, unless Henry comes out really hot and aggressive, I kind of feel like it's going to be pretty starey back and forth. So I lean the Henry side. I also kind of lean to, what's the GTD at?
I was going to say over then. I figured you'd like
minus
the over. I was just going to talk about that.
I kind of like that. Yeah.
Right.
Over 4.5 because I don't think Song. He could knock him out, but
That's what you're fading though. So yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much near pick 'em. Yeah.
Yeah, I might be moderately surprised. Betting. Jared just said in the chat, betting on 38-year-old bantamweights is a dangerous game. So it's not something I'm chomping at the bit for here, but it is something that moderately interests me. Moving on, co-main event, we got Brendan Allen. He's taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Current price, Fluffy minus 275. Comeback on Allen plus 235. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
Kind of seems like every kind of Fluffy fight, it's probably going to be pretty hairy early for him, but I don't think Allen presents a ton in terms of defensive grappling. I do the longer this fight goes per se. And in the striking, don't get me wrong, I think Allen could have his moments here. Fluffy's hittable himself, but I think the cardio gap and the offensive grappling gap is just way too big here on the Fluffy side.
Yeah, I agree. I think Fluffy should be fine. The hardware in general, I think, Fluffy can be a bit soft to the body, but outside of his kicks, Allen doesn't really go there much. And I think Fluffy's got a much, much better chin. I actually think he hits a lot harder with his hands than Allen does as well. So it's you combine that with the fact that he's going to get takedowns at will. We've seen this fight. This fight happened in LFA years ago. They were different fighters then, but Fluffy kind of mauled him over 25 minutes, And I think the takedowns are going to be pretty free here. I think maybe the biggest threat to Fluffy is maybe he gets caught in a guillotine. I could see something like that or some kind of a front choke. That did happen to him back in the day with Marcus Perez. But I think the price is fine. It doesn't really interest me terribly much. Minus 275 on Fluffy, but I think he should do okay.
I think the under is somewhat interesting, but I could
is the under?
Could see it going. So under 2.5 is about plus 140.
I don't mind that at all, actually. That's because Allen is pretty kill or be killed, and so is Fluffy kind of as well, So Brandon saying round 3 a must for Fluffy. We'll see what the prices are. I don't think they're going to be that good if he's minus 300.
Agreed.
They've been pricing that in a lot more recently. Moving on, though, we got Rob Font taking on John Matsumoto. This is a late ad here. Current price, Matsumoto minus 200. The comeback on Font plus 170. A good scrap. I'm not going to have a bet here. I've bet Rob a bunch in the past, but I really think he's kind of at the end of the road. I know he won his last fight, but I didn't think he looked particularly great doing it against Kyler Phillips. I feel like Phillips just gassed out 4 minutes into the fight, and he was just kind of able to put volume on him. But even volume-wise, it was lower than what we're accustomed to seeing from Rob Font. Same thing happened in the fight prior with Davison Figueiredo. Obviously, Font's durability is declining severely, which is not great for a guy who's that come forward and kind of bang style that Font has. Having said that, he's the better fighter. I don't think there's a question about that. The problem for me is just like I think his jab could give Matsumoto some real issues with his timing if he fights intelligently with it. I just, I feel like he's just going to go into the pocket and brawl with him though a lot. Maybe not brawl, but he's going to go in there and look to find his shots like he always does. And Matsumoto, while he's hittable and he's the worst striker of the two, he is very fast and he hits very hard and he counters very, very well. And he seems very durable to me. So given that dynamic, I think Font's the better striker. I think he's got better, more reliable volume, but I feel like Matsumoto has a lot more upside for moments here. He's going to hold his ground there. And then you couple in the fact that Font's grappling has really looked tragic lately in the last couple years. And, Matsumoto, he will mix it in. And Matsumoto's 12 years younger, faster, more durable, and hits harder. I kind of think the price is fine. I'm not really eager to get in on the side here, but I lean Matsumoto. What are your thoughts?
I actually was kind of eager to get on Gene if it still hovered around that minus 160.
Minus 150, I was getting tempted. Yeah, I was.
Right, but really Bet Online, the only book available with that line out. And as we see, it's steaming up to minus 200. Probably going to be like 225 by the time it comes out to most spots. But completely agree with you here. I think takedowns are really the crux of the fight, and I think he can get takedowns. Not at will per se, but he can definitely have a lot of chances to finish the fight, I think, on the ground as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd actually, what's the total here? It's actually very high. I'm actually mildly interested in the under here. Plus 325 to the under seems kind of fucking crazy given what we've seen from Font's durability lately and also how hittable Matsumoto is. Mm-hmm. It's like Font a couple years back, the under was favored against Adrian Yanez, and now it's minus 425 to go over 2.5 in what should be a war. That seems, I actually like that under a fair amount, and I'll probably play it. That's kind of crazy, in my opinion. Moving on, though, we got Gene Silva taking on Melsik Bazarian. Current price, Silva minus 560. Comeback on Melsik plus 410. I guess my question is, did Melsik lose a limb? And we're not being told about it. I think Silva's a very good fighter and a good prospect. Obviously, whooping Drew Dober the way he did was very, very impressive. He's only looked good in the UFC so far, but Melsik's a really good kickboxer. He can be low volume, but he's very, very hard to hit. He measures range pretty well. His kicks are really, really strong. I have a really hard time believing that Silva's north of minus 200 striking with Melsik here. That seems kind of crazy to me. Is Silva going to come out and wrestle him? I suppose that's on the table, but I don't really think his wrestling is all that good, nor do I think his control is all that good. So I don't know. I'm looking at this and feel like I must be missing something because it's still getting hit even past minus 500 now, which makes literally zero sense to me at all. It's even if you assume skill for skill, the gap is that wide. Melsik's a good enough striker that in a kickboxing match, can he be plus 400 against anybody? I'm going to bet Melsik here. I think this is crazy. I think Silva's better. I think he's got better hardware. He's a bit faster, but I don't. I made Silva 67, 70% in that range. I do not see how he's getting priced up now in the 85% range for this fight. What do you think? Am I crazy?
No, I personally think he's in that 70 to 80% myself. But I think Melsik's just pretty one-dimensional in his approach. He's a good kickboxer, but that's really all he is. As you mentioned, pretty low volume. I think Silva's just much bigger hitter here, much more durable, has a little bit of offensive grappling here as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I,
and Melik's level of competition's been pretty bad, to be
I was
fair.
going to just mention that too. Like you look at all the guys that he's actually beaten, none of those guys hold a UFC job anymore. Bruno Souza,
Tucker Lutz.
yep.
Colin
Even I can't
Anglin.
remember his name. Yep, Connor Anglin. That's who
Anglin,
it
yeah.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I get making him a moderate favorite, but it's like you're pricing. Yeah, he has no quality. You're pricing him in the range of like he's a bum, whereas I don't think there's much reason to think that.
He's not a
Silva's
bum, but
had.
he's not a bum, I should say, but he just doesn't have many skills.
I'll frame it. I'll frame it a different way.
Okay.
The guy that Gene Silva fought on Contender Series, who just fought on Contenders again last year, Kevin Vallejos, decent talent, but that was a really close fight for the most part. Is Kevin Vallejos better than Melsik? I kind of doubt it.
No.
That's my point. It's like we've seen even the Jourdain fight. Jourdain just couldn't take a shot and kept getting dropped, but like he was doing fine on minutes. Other than the big moments. So yeah, I don't know. I'll take the.
Listen, there's going to be a time to fade Gene Silva. We've definitely done our fair share of fading him already, but I personally, I don't think this is much of the spot.
Yeah, you could be right. You could be right. I've only faded him. No, I faded him with Ober too. That's right. Yep. Good times. Good times. Moving on. Well, we have kicking off the main card. We got Atomic Alonzo Menifield. He's taking on a debutant 6-0 in Julius Walker. Current price, Menifield's -160. The comeback on Walker is +140. What are your thoughts here, Lags? What do you think of Walker as a fighter?
Personally, I thought he was going to get lined the favorite. Like before even looking at the odds, I was just like, oh, just coming out of his tape, I'm like, oh, this guy's probably just going to be lined the favorite, just the sentiment of Alonzo in general. But I don't think much of Walker as a fighter in general. The guy's pretty big, has some power, but pretty hittable. Have much gas to speak of at all. Like, I mean, you watch some of his tape and it's pretty god awful. Like, I don't think Menifield should have much issue here. I think he can have some offensive grappling of his own right. I think in terms of the cardio, I think he probably has an edge in that department. And even as a striker, I know he's pretty hittable himself, but I think this is fairly competitive standing. So I think the price on Menifield is fine.
I think it should be wider, to be honest. By a fair amount.
That's fair.
It's funny because when I first started taping him, I was like, all right, proactive wrestler. Maybe that could get 205. He could probably give Menifield some issues. But like you get a bit deeper, and I mean, this fight happened in June of last year. You have the Niall Bartling fight. And Bartling's an okay prospect, it seems like. But the way he was getting out grappled by Bartling in the first round of that fight, I'm like, Alonzo Menifield is a much better grappler than Niall Bartling is. Like, just watching that makes me think his actual grappling equity against Menifield is pretty fucking low. Unless it turns out he's got god tier cardio at 205, which maybe he does, but I mean, how many guys in the history of the sport have shown off been volume wrestlers with good cardio at 205? It's like Daniel Cormier and John Jones. Anyone else? Like literally. So I'm pretty skeptical about that. And on the feet, see, I disagree with you here. I think this is going to be one-way traffic standing. Now, I say this: Menifield's 37 years old. He's taken a couple beatings recently, so that's obviously concerning. And I think that's the big tail risk on the Menifield side of his price is just he's older and declining, and which is probably true. And he's obviously taken some damage, but I think he's the much better athlete. I think he's faster. I think he's a much more precise striker. He's obviously way more experienced. I mean, this guy's got 6 fights, and I mean, he did beat Bevan Lewis, but it was like the most classic Bevan Lewis fight ever. Like he took him down, and Bevan Lewis just kind of turtled up and quit like a minute into the fight. Yeah,
that's a lot of his fights, really.
Yeah, it's all of his fights, dude. His first 3 fights, the first 3 opponents he fought had a combined record of 3-9. I don't even know what it's an overreaction to, but it feels like this guy's getting a lot of credit for not accomplishing a whole lot. And I have a hard time picturing him badly out grappling Menifield. Like Devin Clark, who was like a 10-fight UFC vet or 12-fight UFC vet from a Division I wrestling background, had a hard time out grappling Menifield. Jimmy Crute he got him down a few times, but he had a hard time out grappling him in the aggregate of that fight until late in the fight. And I'm just skeptical this guy's going to have the tank late in the fight to actually do it.
Yeah, no shot. I think the under could be a good look too.
Tim
That
just
slight
pointed out, but I
juicer.
think he's right that Walker, that he was supposed to originally fight at heavyweight, and now he's coming down here and fighting Menifield at 205. I mean, Menifield's good. The biggest disadvantage he has is Walker's big. He is very, very big. But I mean, Menifield's way faster. What did you say you could be good? The over?
So the under 1.5, I think,
Minus
might
130.
not be a bad look at minus 130. Yeah. I was going to say, to his point, he was right, though. He was supposed to fight Mark Courier.
The fuck is Mark Courier? In the UFC?
No.
Or was it in a different org? Okay.
No, it was supposed to be a different organization, yeah.
That's really weird. And now he's coming down to light heavyweight to fight Alonzo Menifield. That's bizarre to me. But yeah, I like Menifield here. I think he's got him covered pretty much everywhere. Like I said, I literally cannot get that fight with that Starling guy or Niall, whatever his name is, out of my head. Like that guy is not good. He's not athletic, and he was kind of ragdolling Walker in the grappling.
Could have choked him out.
Menifield's not a bad grappler, man. I'm telling you,
No.
I think he could really wreck this dude. So I'm going to bet Menifield here. I'm seeing what the line does, but I like that.
Menifield sub, John?
It's actually not a bad look. I mean, he's gone for it a few
Depending
times.
on what that is, yeah.
But moving on, though, we got a pretty fun fight here in the featherweight division. We got Andre Fely. He's taking on Melchizedek Costa. Current price, Fely minus 125. The comeback on Costa plus 105. What are your thoughts here?
Might have to do a little bit more tip on this one personally, but I think it's a decent spot for Fely. Like I think without like some offensive wrestling success for Costa, on the feet, I think Fely is a much, much better striker than him. So I think around Pick'em, and obviously he's fought and beaten much better competition than Costa has. So for me around Pick'em, I think it's Fely.
Yeah, it's an interesting fight. I don't have a really strong grasp on it, I got to say, because the one thing that kind of concerns me is I do think Fely's movement has gotten a bit worse over the last few years as he's gotten older in terms of cutting off the cage. If they're in the pocket, I feel Andre is going to piece him up like a fair amount. He's just a much better boxer, much better jab. But Costa he's got pretty good lateral movement, and he's very, very good at like getting off a lot of volume without taking a lot returned at him. And I kind of think he's going to be able to kind of do that to Andre quite a bit. And Andre hasn't been, I mean, the dude, when was the last time a dude proactively wrestled for a win? And like, it's been a long time, So I kind of actually lean to the Costa side, I think, a little bit here, just since I shouldn't say I think he is much younger than Fely is. Obviously, Fely, he's probably, I don't want to say he's washed. I don't think he's washed, but I think he's certainly closer to the end than to the beginning of his career. And I think his movement has gotten a bit worse over the years. But I don't know if I want to bet it because, the truth is, what's Mel Costa's best performance in the UFC? Like Austin Lingo? Like that doesn't, like he hasn't really yet shown that he can like win at this level yet. And that's kind of, given that I don't think he has much finishing equity, that's kind of a red flag because I do think Fely's got more horsepower behind his shots than Costa does. So, and honestly, if Fely decides to go to the wrestling, he can probably get it done. So, yeah, I don't know. I lean Costa, but I probably won't get involved. Moving on, we got Io Cutelaba, the Hulk, taking on Ibo Aslan. Current price, Aslan minus 150. The comeback on Cutelaba, 130 plus 130. What are your thoughts?
This is one I'm definitely going to get involved in on the Eon side, though. While these guys are like maybe mirror matches of each other, like Eon's, again, fought and beaten much better guys. And in my opinion, he actually has like serviceable skills for the UFC. He has like okay offensive wrestling on the feet, has big power. Like to me, Aslan's just a bit of a round one merchant guy. Cardio, very, very unproven. Just, again, all power, defensive grappling. I don't think it's very great as well. I think Eon can have success there. So plus 135, plus 140 for Eon. It's definitely going to be a bet for me.
Yeah, I like Eon a fair amount. I have concerns that he gets himself knocked out early in this fight because obviously Aslan is a scary fucker. The problem for me is like I feel like Eon's better at everything than Ibo is, in my opinion. Go ahead. What I can't get out of my head is watching Anton Turkalj go forward against him and just largely outstrike him for the majority of that fight. Turkalj is a bad striker, and he didn't get takedowns and was winning. There were 1-1 going into the third or in the third. And like Eon is a much better striker than Turkalj, and he's much more powerful. And Ibo is very, very hittable. So it's like on the one hand, Ibo is a bigger hitter than Ion is for sure. But on the other hand, I also think Ibo is much more available to hit than Ion is. So it's like, I almost think their critical hit upside is actually kind of similar early in this fight. In my opinion, Urslan was a much more technical striker as a boxer than Ion is, and was a lot more problematic in a lot of respects. Couple that with the fact that, like, the one time we've seen Ibo on bottom, he's looked absolutely horrendous. And Calaba is almost certainly the best wrestler he's fought in his career to date. He's a much better wrestler than the Pleasure Man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it's probably a close fight because you got to give Ibo, a fair amount of KO upside here. But I also think you got to give Calaba a fair amount of KO upside. He's got like all the grappling upside in this fight. I also think he's a lot more durable than he gets credit for. Like, he got knocked out by Kennedy, but he ate some nasty knees when that happened. And he got knocked out by Ankalaev, but it's like, I mean, Ankalaev would take Aslan's head off, That's I don't care. I don't really care about either of those performances at all. And Ion himself is pretty aggressive. So, yeah, I mean, I'm getting the much more experienced fighter who's fought a higher level of competition, who's also the better grappler, who's also probably the better technical striker, against Ibo Aslan, who's got, dynamite in his hands, but that's really it. And even that, man, dude, I know he's got a ton of KOs, but most of his career is fought against absolute scrubs. And Turkali was taking his shots pretty good until he got knocked out, And Turkali
that's all the commentary was talking about, really. Like, oh man, look at the chin on Turkali here. Look at the chin on Turkali.
And he doesn't have a great chin, like that's the thing. So
this gives me a lot of vibes similar with what I was going to say was to that Urslan fight. Because I mean, Urslan and Aslan to me are very comparable, and that fight had
I think
sweaty
Urslan
moments
is better than Aslan, to be honest. It did have its sweaty moments, and that's the other problem with Ion, though, right? It's like why it's always kind of hard to pull the trigger, and why you can't really pull the trigger big on him is the guy is very good at creating variance, which is good, but unfortunately, he is also very good at creating variance in situations that there doesn't need to be variance when he's the better fighter.
Yeah,
like getting stuck underneath
Urslan too.
Yeah, very gigantic confidence fighter. But yeah, plus 130. I mean, it looks like it's all Aslan money, so I'm happy to wait and try to. I'll probably get in close to fight time on it, but I like the onside here. I just feel he's better everywhere, honestly. Moving on, Fugit fight is canceled. That got announced a little bit ago, which is unfortunate. We've got Nursultan Ruzaboyev, nicknamed Black. Still don't really get it. Taking on a black dude in Eric Mcconico. Have you taped this fight, Lags? What are your thoughts? Ruzaboyev, current price, he is a big favorite. Minus 330, comeback on Mcconico, plus 270.
I have. And I want to bet the Mcconico side. The only thing I'm just struggling to get there on his side is I don't really know if the durability is there. And I think he's really going to need that early in this fight because while Ruzaboyev's not very good, I do think, obviously, like we've talked about many times, I think the guy is a huge fraud, but the guy is very offensively potent on the feet. Singular shots, very dynamic, causes a lot of chaos. I do think, though, Eric can have success striking. I think he's obviously the much more technical striker, has some power in his own right. I think he can mix in some offensive wrestling, too.
Sorry.
Go ahead. The only other thing,
I
was just going to talk about him getting caught in submissions, too. That's the only other thing I haven't really seen either. Can Eric defend those, mean, opportunistic type finishes? I'm not too sure. I'm more worried about the durability, personally.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my big point of concern in this fight as well. The thing is, Ruzaboyev, you're right. He is dynamic, and obviously he hits pretty hard. But to your point, it's all single shots, not much defense, pretty poor grappler. He's the kind of guy you want to bet as like a big underdog or even a medium underdog because he does create a lot of variance with that style. But at minus 330, I just struggled to see the upside for him. Like, Mcconico, to me, seems like a decent fighter. Like, I don't think he's, like, great or anything, but pretty technical. He's pretty fast. He seems like a bit of a hoss, honestly. Trains out of the MMA lab, so he's got a really good camp. They usually have pretty good game plans. I think if anybody's going to grapple here, it's probably going to be him, and, we've seen as Ruzi starts to slow down, it gets freaking ugly when he gets put on bottom. But even on the feet, like Ruzaboyev usually is working with a giant reach advantage, but, he only has a 1-inch reach advantage in this fight. And so I think Mcconico, I agree with you. He's not the most durable, and I think he could get knocked out. But I also think he can knock Ruzaboyev out. Like, I think he's going to find a home for his shots, while they're swinging. I'm fine making Ruzaboyev a favorite. He is more dynamic. He's obviously the one with the UFC experience here. But minus 330 for a guy with his just glaring defensive holes, just in all phases, makes really no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, Ruzabov's a guy with 9 losses. Like, let's not forget that. The guy had a bunch of losses coming into the UFC, mostly against cans. I don't really see him as a guy who can be minus 300 against anybody with a pulse, except for maybe Cedric Dimas. That was probably reasonable. But how much of a pulse does Cedric Dimas have when it comes to being a fighter? True. I don't really know. But yeah, I'm gonna eventually take Mcconico here. I think the price is just very, very extreme. Moving on, I'll throw it back to you again. We got Ricky Simone. He's taking on Javid Basharat. Current price, Basharat minus 310. The comeback on Simone plus 260. Any interest in either side here?
Not really. I think this is kind of giving me vibes of the main event where the new guard is ushering out the old guard, where I think Ricky is going to need to have, a decent bit of wrestling success to stay competitive in this fight. And I just personally don't see it. I think Javid stays safe in the offensive wrestling department. Obviously, the much better striker on the feet as well. I think this should be Javid. Shouldn't have much issue.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. I am. The thing is, what concerns me with Javid is, and I was talking to someone about this, and they brought this up, so credit to them, not me. But I could see Ricky maybe implementing something similar to like the Tony Gravely fight, and it's worth keeping in mind that Gravely did win the first round against Javid, and it was a fairly competitive fight. Where maybe Ricky's able to get a lot of clinch time, land like 4 or 5 takedowns, and just able to keep minutes close just via being very, very grindy. I could see that happening. But Sam said we're at the stage of calling him the corpse of Ricky Simon. I don't know, man. Like, I think he was hurt for his last fight. That's the other thing. So as bad as he looked last fight, he did have an ankle brace on, and he looked fucking awful. But I do wonder if he was hurt for that. He shouldn't be regressing at this stage of his career.
He's 32,
He's not that. Yeah. Said Ricky Large. He shouldn't really be regressing at this point in his career. And Javid, because I wanted to play Javid when I saw it come out, but fuck, man, this guy does not really separate on minutes often. Like, he kind of, even against Mendonca, the margins were not exactly huge. He lost to Amin Zahabi. Zahabi's a good striker, but like the Gravely fight was very close, and I think Ricky Simon is better than Tony Gravely. So I don't know, man. I have a feeling that there is probably value on Ricky, but having said that, I also feel like Ricky's downside, especially if he is over the cliff, is just like too low to really consider playing him here, because I don't think he's going to get top time. I don't think he can hold Basharat down. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Moving on, we have a absolute shit fest. We got Mansour Abdul Malik taking on Nick Klein. Current price on Malik, minus 800. The comeback on Klein, plus 550. Honestly, it's like, this is going to be the kind of fight we pass because we're like, Klein's a bum and Malik should run through him, where he gets like fucking heel hooked and we're just sick because the fade on Malik never really comes. But no, I mean, this fight, they're making this fight for Mansour to get a highlight reel finish, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm somewhat Mansour skeptical skill-wise. Obviously, he's an athletic hoss. He's huge. Comes from a wrestling background, although I don't think his wrestling is really all that great. But, I mean, Nick Klein is awful. I mean, he's a wrestler, a jiu-jitsu guy, and his wrestling is not that good. His striking is not that good, and his jiu-jitsu is not that good. And he is massively, massively athletically outgunned in this fight. I just think Mansour is, I think I don't want to say he's free. I'm not betting minus 800 or parlaying it, but I feel like they're making this fight for him to knock him out. So I don't have a lot else to say. He's the much better fighter. He should take care of him. What are your thoughts?
The physicality gap here is massive.
It's insane. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, this should be a quick finish, like you mentioned, for Abdul Malik. I Klein has some offensive wrestling upside, but it's very low level. This should be a squash match.
I feel like Klein's like best case scenario is having like a rerun of Malik's fight with Wes Schultz on a Contender Series, where it's like maybe he gets to a good, Malik gets a little tired and he gets to a good position in round 2 or so. But I was actually hoping for a decent under here, but minus 185 on under 1.5 that's pretty rough. Can't do much business with that.
No.
Moving on, we got the final fight, or the opening fight. We got Rafael Cerqueira. He is taking on Modestas Bowkus. Current price, Bowkus, fucking minus 370. The comeback on Cerqueira, plus 305. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
Another underdog I have interest in, and I know a lot of people will probably just point to his last fight against Aslan, where he just gets sparked pretty quickly. Not a great look. I get that, and I don't think Sirera is a great fighter in general, but pretty huge, has big power for the division. And Modestas, to me, I mean, he's never a minus 300 fighter. I mean, I've said this against Paga too when he was a minus 210 favorite, and I bet Paga at plus 170, and I still thought he won that fight. The guy's just low margins, doesn't have much grappling equity. He's definitely fought and beaten, obviously, the much better competition, but minus 400 for Modestas just is insane to me.
Yeah, Modestas fucking sucks. Liam just said it in the chat. He's gonna fight him. He's like an okay fighter, he's not a grappler. He's got very limited grappling ability. He's got very limited power, and he's kind of fragile. He's like a back foot fighter who wants to out volume you, except he's medium volume. He's not particularly high volume. So he's fighting Sirera, and I mean, Sirera may well suck as well. I don't know why, we care. I don't know that he belongs in the UFC, Rafael Sirera, but
Agreed.
Last fight, he was pick him with Ibo Aslan, literally pick him in that fight, and gets knocked out in the first round, which if you're going to lose to Ibo, far more often than not, it's going to be via getting knocked out brutally in the first round. Yeah. And now he goes from pick him with Ibo to plus 300 against Modestas. Modestas, we know, is fragile. Sirera, we know, has a lot more firepower here. And that, without grappling upside in and of itself, that's enough for me. Maybe it turns out Sirera is an all-time bum, but I'm happy to take a shot on him being at least competent enough to compete with Modestas Bowkus. Yeah.
Well, it's like people, we'll talk about it here, John. If people have a decent sentiment on Aslan, if Aslan was in this spot instead of Sirera and it was Modestas and Aslan was plus 300, you would just see Aslan bets flooding on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't think Cirque is. I mean, Pepe said it. Cirque money line.
I don't think he's great.
I don't think he's very. I am expecting him to be a very closer to the bottom of the division fighter. I said it before, but if you don't have a lot of power and you don't have much grappling upside, and you're fighting a guy with way more power, unless Modestas is going to come out here and put on a consistent striking clinic, I don't really see how he can be 75% implied. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, yeah. I mean, look, leave in the chat, Modestas true. That's Wednesday 30 versus WLF. Yeah. But yeah, Modestas, he's like a WMMA fighter. That's what he is, a 205-pound WMMA fighter. Yep. So I'll be on Sirera here. I'm not I don't have any great confidence in it or in him. His tape is pretty sketchy, but I'm honestly probably going to have a couple units on him. I'm going to play it medium size because I just think the line's got to be off. And I think the potential hindsight upside of Sirera in this fight, the range of lines that this could possibly be lined at, in my opinion, is anywhere from pick'em to Modestas minus 300. So there's just so much potential upside on the Sirera side at this number. So I'll be on him.
What's the number where it's at? Where it's at now with the number Modestas, there's no meat on the bone. I don't see how you could see it that way. Minus 3, minus 310, minus 320, or even like you said, minus 370 on Bet Online. Crazy.
I mean, Modestas, not only did he go life and death with Pauga, but Modestas also went, was getting beaten up by Marcin Prokhnio pretty badly. Yeah. He had big issues with Andreas Michailidis. It's the guy he had big issues with freaking Charlie Campbell, in Cage Warriors. He is not that good. So yeah, I'll take the shot here. We'll see what happens. But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. We appreciate it. Kind of a shitty pod because it's a pretty shitty card. There's not really a whole lot to say. And obviously at Uncle Weezy's point in the chat, there's been a lot of fights circulated in and out on this card. It's pretty brutal. Yeah. I would hope that Billy Goff gets another opponent, though. I mean, Fuga pulled out a little early. I feel like we still have, I hope so. I mean, the thing is, the one thing that I'm hopeful that we'll get more fights for is that it's in Seattle. So they're doing it in person. They are trying to obviously generate a lot more attention to it. But this is rough. Imagine if you paid for a decent seat to this and the top 5 fights all got canceled.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, it's a COVID card.
Because I know Quinn was saying he almost bought tickets to it. That'd be awful. again, like you
Yeah.
mentioned. I mean, we almost had Edson Barbosa, Steve Garcia. You had the Curtis Blades fight on
Dude, that
there.
was there were a lot of good fights. It was Font and Dominic Cruz originally. There was a lot of cool fights on the card. It's been ugly. It has been very, very ugly. And we had the original booking was Fugit and Islam Dulatov, who's a wild man, which then turned into Fugit, which now turns into nothing.
And the original booking that probably again still would have been a squash match was Abdul Malik and Tricoli, and that would have been hilarious.
Oh yeah, that I was here for that though. Watching Tricoli get his head beaten in would have been pretty funny. Although, yeah, we don't need to talk about a fight that didn't happen. But yeah, sure. I mean, it's awful. It's awful. But we'll bet on it. Is what it is. Maybe we'll check back in later in the week to discuss props as we go through it. I'll talk to you offline about that.
Yep.
But yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Appreciate you joining us on a Sunday. Sorry they don't have many more interesting things to say about this card, but it is what it is. Them's the breaks. Drop a like, subscribe. We'd appreciate it, and we'll see you next week at the same time. Peace.